Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Dave's Faves. And today I'm talking at long last about Mahler's Eighth. And this is my however choice, as many of these Dave's Faves will be, but I still like pushing them more than once and in different formats because it's just not enough to mention something and then forget about it for the next 1,000 or so videos. We need to keep the best recordings in the public eye. And so that's what I'm doing with this. Antoni on Naxos. And this is not a recording that most people are going to think of with Mahler Eighth because, well, you've got Bernstein and you've got Schulte and you've got like all these Abbado and Boulez and all these other people doing it. And they mostly suck. They really do. I mean, Schulte doesn't suck, and he's got great soloists. Bernstein doesn't suck interpretively. The sonics are a little bit iffy, but it's still a very good performance. There are good performances, but the two best Mahler eights are unquestionably Witt and Gary Bertini on EMI Warner, which is live. And the problem with that is that, good luck finding it. I mean, the Gary Bertini Mahler cycle is one of the great Mahler cycles out there, but it was never treated with any kind of respect or consideration by EMI or / Warner because Bertini wasn't the most important conductor in the list, and so they didn't care. But he was a great Mahlerian, and his Mahler Eighth is really one of the pinnacles of that cycle and one of the great Mahler Eights. But I'm not going to talk about that. We're talking about Witt on Naxos. Now, what does this have going for it? Let's put it this way. Mahler's Eighth is like one of those CD players with, remember when you were getting CD players? And it used to be you had like a CD player, you put the CD in it and you push the button and it would play. But then it became impossible to find CD players that didn't have multi-disc changers and cassette things that you could stackable stuff and drawers that slid in and out and all these electronic things, and all they did was break, right? The more gizmos and gadgets or bells and whistles you have in a piece of electronics, the likelier they are to break. It's true of your car with all of the options, the power windows and the mirrors and the things and the buttons and stuff, and it just breaks. And then it costs a fortune to fix them. Well, you can't do that in a piece of music in the same way. But Mahler's Eighth is like that. It has so many moving parts. As with an opera or any other huge complex piece of music, you've got 8 soloists, you've got the offstage brass, you've got the zillions of screaming people, a huge orchestra. It's just an invitation for disaster. And of course, I saw one of the big ones. It was that unbelievable performance, a demented concert actually, that was given by the American Symphony Orchestra under Leon Botstein, where he did Ives 4, then Mahler 8, believe it or not, and it fascinated me because the beginning of the slow movement, the part 2, which is an adagio, which is just blum blum bum 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 bum. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. What could be easier? They blew it. They got completely out of sync. They had to restart 3 times before they got it right. And that was the easy part. All of the screaming hysteria takes care of itself. You just wind it up and let it go. I said before, Mahler 8 does not need an interpreter. It needs a traffic cop. You're just sort of directing masses of sound. And the key is to just keep the bloody thing moving and let all of the people do the things they're going to do. It's so well written. It is so perfectly balanced and figured out. And Mahler at least had the benefit of actually hearing it and publishing it and making sure all of the notation is clear. There's no question what he wants or how it should be done. And there are so many performances where the conductors just blow it, almost always in the same way, by being too slow and too heavy. And by not observing the tempo changes, especially in part 2, where you've got the trio of 3 enormously irritating women, and you have the different groups when you're enacting the final scene from Faust. You've got all these solo arias and you've got the choruses. They've got to be characterized, but they've got to flow. The whole thing flows beautifully if you take the allegro, the first movement, at a real allegro impetuoso, which is what Mahler calls it, impetuous, fast, or at least with abandon, right? And the second movement is like a Wunderhorn sort of thing. It's a return to that world. It has to have that sort of folk-like innocence and simplicity, and that also means movement. A master at that, by the way, part two, was Tenstedt. Tenstedt's Mahler Eighth is one of his great Mahler performances too. I mean, when it came out, people were very, talking famously about how it used smaller forces than normally, meaning like, just 500 people instead of 1,000. But what really mattered was his wonderful control of tempo, his naturalness, and spontaneity, which is it's hard to do it with that many people. But Witt manages it just as well. I mean, this is a great performance. And I don't have to tell you, because we've talked about Antoni Witt's work before many times in the Tarangallela Symphony, the Dvorak Requiem, the Janáček's Glagolitic Mass. He is a fantastic conductor of choral music. His Penderecki and Ludoslavsky stuff is amazing. It's all fabulous. He's a great choral conductor, and he's just a great conductor, which doesn't always go hand in hand. And he's got a whole bunch of choirs here, the Polish Radio Choir in Krakow, the Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski University Choir, and then the Warsaw National Philharmonic Choir and Orchestra, and the Warsaw Boys Choir, and a whole bunch of soloists you probably haven't heard of, but who are very, very good and more than capable of handling their parts, and an incredibly natural sounding recording. Again, you don't need gimmicks. You don't have to do what Schulte did, which was record the whole thing and then go find an organ like in Vienna or somewhere else and dub it in later. And the more of that stuff you do, the worse it's going to sound. You just want to have a nice big hall with a fabulous location for the microphones, and then you set it up and you let it rock. And this performance rocks. The sound is great. The interpretation is just marvelous, and I cannot recommend it strongly enough. It is my favorite Mahler Eighth, hands down. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.